All right, so I want to show you a video because it's really important, because we're shifting now from pretty much a broad what's going on in the nation to the individual. All right, I have not talked about this, and I'm sure you heard about it by now, but I'm going to give you my 2 cents on it. All right, what you're going to be seeing on your screen is going to be a video from Black Friday 2019, and I'm going to be showing you this as I talk, because there's people on listening to this on audio only. All right, so those were the good old days. All right, Black Friday 2019, people thought that they were never going to experience a time where they were going to find themselves like that. But instead of being for cheap goods, they were going to try to get, cheap TVs, cheap toys, cheap systems, whatever it is. Now they're going to be forced to do the same thing, but for food. Hopefully this never happens. Hopefully there's some miracle that delays all of this for many more years. But if the trend keeps the way it is, and the first article that I read to you is correct, that we're going to see the explosion of hyperinflation in 2021 or 2022, you're going to see people fighting like that, but for food. That is exactly the same thing that I showed you in previous podcasts of people in Venezuela when they started fighting over live poultry, over, grocery stores just giving away food, and instead of people waiting in line, they were so desperate that they were starting to pressure the people to just chuck it into the crowd, and people fight over it. There was a person that laughed at that when I showed those videos, and obviously they don't realize that there's probably going to be them here in the next few years. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but that could be them. So what happened? Now we're talking about hardcore evidence, not just speculation, on what happens when there's a hyperinflation. The first thing that people suffer through is hunger. That's exactly what a lot of people are going through right now. The only reason it's not as desperate as it could be is because of the government help. All right, so we've passed the trillions of dollars, and all these programs are being funded again. But for how long? How long can we continue on kicking down this can down the road until we can no longer do it? I've given you this analogy before. The can already went off the edge, but what we did is we built a bridge under it, and we kick in the can on the bridge, and we building the bridge as the can gets kicked, and eventually the bridge is going to be so far into the ocean that it's going to take a long time for that ship to keep on building it until we cannot do it anymore, and that can finally falls into the bottom of the ocean. We get into that moment in American history. The next article that I have to use is very important because people are starting to steal to survive. This is from Cron.com. It's stealing to survive. More Americans are shoplifting food as aid runs out during the pandemic. An estimated 54 million Americans will struggle with hunger this year, a 45% increase from 2019. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, with food aid programs like SNAP and WIC being reduced and other federal assistance on the brink of expiration, food banks and pantries are being inundated, reporting hours-long waits and lines that stretch into the thousands. Several federal food programs that have provided billions of dollars in fresh produce, dairy, and meat to U.S. food banks also are set to expire at the end of the year. The largest among them, the Farms to Families Food Box, has provided more than 120 million food boxes during the pandemic, and it's already running out of funding in many parts of the country. There is the proof that I had talked about a minute ago. That article shows you that the food banks are starting to run out of funding. They're starting to collapse. They're starting to fail. It says that 54 million Americans will struggle with hunger this year. How much more are they going to struggle next year? In my opinion, okay, if everybody was to follow the way that I teach preparedness, by the beginning of this spring, there will be 54 million farmers trying to be self-reliant. Because what is the first thing that is happening here? People are going hungry. That's exactly the same thing that we saw in Venezuela. People are going hungry, or people start to go hungry. And then the government try to help, and then they're sending boxes of food that only last about 3 days, but those boxes are not being replenished every 3 days. they're being replenished every 3 weeks. So even though they have only 3 days worth of food in that little box, they have to wait 3 weeks later to get another 3 days worth of food. So the casualty here is going to be the children being hungry and the elderly, pretty much dying from malnutrition. And pregnant women, they might have miscarriages. That's where it's important for you to make sure that you are as soon as this happens, you are self-reliant. Okay, so this is something that I'm really displeased with the prepper community, and I'm gonna say it outright, because every time you hear someone talk about preparedness, it's always saying you have to stock up on food. They don't really give you a number, because it has always been your own opinion on how much you think you're gonna need. All right, this is where I come in, and this is where I give you the hardcore facts. The reason that you want at the very, very least, 2 years worth of food is because as soon as something happens, as soon as this thing, falls all apart, once we hit the hyperinflation in the United States, you're going to have to start putting food on the ground so you can replenish yourself without having to really freak out and go into Walmart or wait on the government to start handing out free food. You're going to have to, have a garden already running. And if you have crop failure, that's when you have your stocks on. So now when people tell you to stock up on things, there's never a plan for replenishment. They only tell you, you got to stock up for 2 months. Okay, so now your 2 months worth of food ran out. Now what? Now you're going to become a marauder and you're going to go door to door trying to see what your neighbor has? The very thing that we're preparing to avoid being, or, for people to go against us, are you going to become the very same thing because you don't have a replenishment plan? That is exactly the reason why I teach this. That is exactly the reason why when people start making fun of preppers, I give them the facts, okay? And I tell them, you may be laughing at us right now, or at least at me right now, because I tell you that you to have at least 2 years worth of food, and for you, that's a lot of food. But in reality, once you find yourself in a situation where the grocery stores no longer have what you need, and even if they did, it's so expensive you cannot afford it, you're going to be very happy that you were able to stock up on the things that have over 20 years shelf life. Because once you stock up on all of that and you start using it little by little, because really what you're relying on is what you can grow out of the ground, then that is going to last you even longer, and then that's going to save your life.
The Man-Made Survival Show.